How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you in these days between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, a very special, elevated time. Great joy. I hope your Yom Kippur was as meaningful and uplifting as mine was. We really, our minion just took it to a new level, and we were just flying high by the time of Neela. It was pretty amazing. And I must say that this year I took it more seriously than previous years, that it's a mitzvah to eat on the day before Yom Kippur just as much as it is to fast on Yom Kippur. So I really kept eating all day long the day before. And perhaps that combined with a little Hasidic, Kabbalistic teaching that our friend taught us about taking 7 sips from a cup of water as the last thing you eat, where you kind of work your way around the circumference of the cup. I don't know, that's supposed to help with the fast. But whether it was that Kabbalistic thing or really stuffing my face the day before, I didn't get the headache that I usually get when I fast, and I'm so grateful for that. Anyway, how's everybody doing? Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Yehudit in South Carolina, Paul in the Great Northwest, Carla in Brazil, Bill in mid-Missouri, Paula is watching Shandora in the Bronx, Bella in Florida, Stephen in New Hampshire. And it skipped on me. Stephen in New Hampshire, Ryan in Florida, Sharon in New Jersey, Sandy in Michigan, Leona in Illinois, Tom in PA, Bella in the house. Oh, I keep skipping. Jonathan in LA, and Karen in Northern California, Gisette in Colorado, Aoife in Florida, Marjorie in North Carolina, Marie in Freeport, Lynn in Maryland. Welcome, everybody. We're going to, keep on the schedule by doing a double today, although we'll sort of do most of the second page and then save some of it for tomorrow. But at any rate, that keeps us on the Daf Yomi schedule, which is nice after Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But we're probably going to fall behind once we get through those first 2 days and last 2 days of Sukkot. But maybe we'll be able to keep doing it, do the makeup right away, which would be nice. At any rate, our dafs today are pages 43 and 44 here in Tractate Kiddushin, the 20th volume of the Talmud. We're in chapter 2, continuing our discussion of Mishna number 1. The concept is agency. A man can appoint an agent to betroth a woman to him. A woman can appoint an agent to accept betrothal for her. And then once we bring up agency, we're looking at some further laws of agency outside of the realm of betrothal. We got a head start on page 43 before Yom Kippur. So we're picking this up near the bottom of 43a. It was stated that Amoraim, the sages of the Gemara, engaged in a dispute concerning the following issue. Rav says an agent can become a witness. If one was appointed as an agent to perform a certain task, he can then serve as a witness that the action was performed. Meaning if it comes to some kind of a court case, that the one who was deputized as an agent to perform the action can actually testify as a witness in court, in a rabbinic court, that he completed the task. Why would that be a problem? Because, as we've seen earlier and we'll see soon, there's this concept that when you appoint an agent to do something, it's like you are doing it yourself, legally speaking, and you don't testify as a witness against or in favor of yourself, right? So you are not a qualified witness for yourself. For the same, and for that reason, for example, your spouse is disqualified from being a witness against you as well. So, can an agent be a witness, right? So Rav says an agent can be a witness. In the school of Rabbi Shela, they say an agent cannot become a witness. And the Gemara asks, what is the reason of the school of Rabbi Shela? If we say it is because the one who appointed him did not say to the agent, be a witness for me, and appointed him rather only as an agent, well, if that is so, What about the case of betrothal? If one betrothed a woman in the presence of two people and did not say to them, "You are my witnesses," so too would they hold that this is not a betrothal? It is not. The answer is no. That's a rhetorical question, and therefore it is not necessary to explicitly appoint a witness. You don't have to say, "You are going to be my witness for me that such and such happened," for them to then function as a witness if it later ends up in court. So rather, the dispute is like this. Rav says an agent can become a witness since we strengthen his words of testimony because he attests to a matter of which he is certain, right? If an agent was, a person appointed an agent, say, deliver this money for me to Tom who lent me the money, so please deliver this money to Tom. Okay, so the agent can then testify that the money was delivered to Tom because nobody knows better than the agent that it happened, right? He saw it. He's the one who delivered it with his hands. Of course, he should be able to serve as a witness according to Rav. In the school of Rabbi Shela, they say an agent cannot become a witness. Why? Since the master said that the legal status of a person's agent is like that of himself. The agent is considered like the one who appointed him himself, and just as one cannot testify with regard to a matter that concerns himself, the same applies to one's agent. So the Gemara raises an objection from a Baraisa to the statement of Rav, who says that an agent can become a witness. If one said to three people, "Go out and betroth that woman for me," then one of them is the agent for the betrothal, and the other two serve as witnesses. And this is the statement of Beis Shammai, indicating that the one who's an agent is not a witness. And Beis Hillel say they are all potential agents, and as an agent cannot become a witness, none of them can become witnesses. This would be according to whether Beis Shammai or Beis Hillel. It would appear that an agent cannot serve as a witness. So Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel disagree only with regard to a case where one said this to three people, but with regard to two people, all agree that agents are not able to serve as witnesses. In fact, this is not the law. An agent can serve as a witness. Let's see how we get there. The Gemara answers, it was he, Rav, who says that an agent can serve as a witness, who said his ruling in accordance with the opinion of that Tana, i.e. the version of Beis Shammai as presented by Rabbi Nassim. As it is taught in a Baraisa, Rabbi Nassim says, Beis Shammai say, that the agent and one witness are sufficient to carry out the agency and to testify, and Beis Hillel say the agent and two witnesses are needed. But in both cases, we don't have necessarily an issue that an agent can't serve as a witness. And the Gemara questions this explanation, and would Rav rule in accordance with the opinion of Beis Shammai? And the Gemara answers, because generally, Beis Hillel, right, the law is according to Beis Hillel, in disputes between this, the followers of Hillel and the followers of Shammai. Rav is much later than Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, and by then Beis Hillel was generally established as the law. So why would Rav rule in accordance with Beis Shammai? And the Gemara answers, no, he would not rule in accordance with Beis Shammai. Reverse the opinion so that it is Beis Hillel who said that the agent and one witness suffice. And Rav Acha, the son of Rava, taught the dispute of the Amoraim, the sages of the Gemara, in the opposite manner. Rav says an agent cannot become a witness, and in the school of Rabbi Shela, they say an agent can become a witness, and the Gemara concludes, and the law is that an agent can become a witness. Rava says that Rav Nachman says it follows that if one said to two people, "Go and betroth the woman for me," the very same people who are his agents for the betrothal are also his witnesses. And a similar law is true with regard to divorce. If a man sent a bill of divorce to his wife with two people, they both serve as agents of delivery of the get, the bill of divorce, and as witnesses that the wife received it, and therefore the divorce has happened. Now we're on 43b. And a similar law applies with regard to cases of monetary law. If one appoints agents to perform a transaction for him, for example, paying a debt to his creditor, they can testify that he has paid. And the Gemara comments, and it is necessary for Rav Nachman to teach this law in each of these legal domains, as had he taught us this law only in the case of betrothal, one could say that the agents can serve as witnesses because they are coming to render her forbidden to everyone else. And therefore, there is no reason reason to suspect them of lying, as their testimony renders her forbidden to them as well. They couldn't have some ulterior motive, right? In terms of, like, if you testify that this woman is betrothed when in fact she isn't, you personally don't benefit from that, so why would the witness lie? But with regard to divorce, then we should be concerned that perhaps the agent cast his eyes upon her and he is testifying falsely so that he can marry her. Right? Maybe he's saying, yeah, that woman is divorced. I know, I delivered the get to her, and it's not true. Why does he want that? Because he wants to marry her. Perhaps we should be concerned about this. And had Rav Nachman taught us this law only in the case of divorce, it could have been said that the agents are not suspected of lying because a woman is not fit to marry two people. And since they testify as a pair, there's two of them, the witnesses, there's no concern that they both might have designs upon her. But with regard to money, a monetary case, one might say that these two witnesses who are lying can be corrupt and divide the money that's at stake between them. Perhaps they never paid the debt, right? Like I send Tom to pay I always make up these silly names, but whatever. I send John to pay my debt to Tom, right? And let's say I send John and Bill to pay my debt to Tom. And they're going to be witnesses. They're going to act as my agents and the witnesses that the money I entrusted to them was delivered to my lender. But maybe what they're going to do is conspire, keep the money, testify that it was delivered, and that the lender must be lying when he says that he never received it, and then they could keep the money, right? We should be concerned about that in a monetary case, and therefore maybe we shouldn't allow agents to become witnesses. So with regard to money, one might say that these two can divide it between them, and perhaps they never paid the debt, but kept the money themselves. Therefore, all these examples are necessary. We might have been concerned about that, but in fact, we're not, right? Generally, we're going to say that the one who appoints an agent has reason to believe that that agent is trustworthy. It's going to be unusual that the agent pockets the money or lies about delivering a get or a betrothal, etc. And so we allow agents to testify. Now, the Gemara asks, what does Rav Nachman actually hold? If he holds that in the case of one who lends money to another in the presence of witnesses, the debtor must repay him in the presence of witnesses, then these agents are affected by their testimony, as if they say, we did not repay him but returned the money to the one who appointed us, then the one who appointed them will say to them, so pay me back the money I gave you to repay the debt. So the agents are considered as the debtors of the one who appointed them, as they took money from him. They would not be deemed credible to state that they returned the money to the one who appointed them, as they do not have witnesses that they did so. Consequently, they have a financial incentive to testify falsely that they fulfilled their agency and repaid the debt. So rather, Rav Nachman actually holds that in the case of one who lends money to another in the presence of witnesses, the debtor does not need to repay him in the presence of witnesses. And since the agents are able to say, we returned the money to the debtor, even without there being witnesses to substantiate their claim, they can also be deemed credible to say, we repaid the creditor, as they have no financial incentive to lie. And the Gemara comments, and now, since the time of Rav Nachman, when the sages instituted an oath of inducement, then these witnesses take that oath and that they gave the money to him. So what is this oath of inducement? This is an oath instituted by the sages in a case where a defendant completely denies a claim. So these witnesses would be affected by their testimony. If they were to claim that they returned the money to the one who appointed them, they would be required to take an oath of inducement to that effect. Consequently, they have an incentive to lie and claim that they fulfilled their agency and repaid the loan. Therefore, their testimony that they fulfilled their agency is not deemed credible. Instead, these witnesses take an oath in court that they gave the money to him, i.e. to the lender, and the lender in turn takes an oath that he did not take the money owed to him, and then the debtor has to pay the lender his debt a second time, as the sages ruled in similar cases. Now, that area of law about this oath of inducement, we're going to go into that in greater depth later in our journey through the Talmud, but it's just a good reminder that not all, but many of these laws make sense within a pious society, right? Where if somebody is forced to take an oath, right? It's one thing to lie. It's one thing to lie to the lender, to lie to the one who receives the loan, to lie to anyone who will listen, even to lie to a sage. But to stand in court and take an oath publicly and before God and lie about that, it's such a big transgression that it was a real, there were not so many people that would stand up and take such an oath. These days, I think there's a lot of people that just don't care. They become so secular, so separated, so distant from the meaning that your word is your bond and your word before God, you'll be held accountable before the heavenly court. I wonder how well this would work today. But in this society, it certainly was effective, and that's why the sages ruled that way. Okay, going back to our Mishnah, new topic. The Mishnah teaches that a man can betroth his daughter to a man. In other words, a father can betroth his daughter to a man when she is a young woman, right? So a young woman is actually a very specific time period from basically when she's 12 to 12 and a half. This is when she's older than a minor and not an adult, right? Adult and, legally speaking. The Mishnah teaches that a father can betroth his daughter to a man when she is a young woman. Now, we learned in a Mishnah there in Tractate Gittin 64b, with regard to a betrothed young woman, she and her father are each eligible to receive her bill of divorce. So remember that in ancient times, quite common to betroth a girl when she's quite young. Doesn't mean she's going to start living with her betrothed, right? The wedding might be postponed for years in the case of someone so young, but the betrothal means that she is not free to go, accept marriage from or betrothal of anyone else. And if they're going to break off the betrothal, they would need a get, right? They would need a bill of divorce to break it off. But when she's so young, her father is the one who betroths her. She doesn't do it herself, especially when she's a minor. When she's in this in-between state, young woman, right? So here the laws are a little bit particular. So we learned in a Mishnah there. With regard to a betrothed young woman, she and her father are each eligible to receive her bill of divorce, to end this betrothal. So Rabbi Yehuda said, 2 hands do not have the right to acquire an item on behalf of one person as one. Meaning, if the young woman is able to acquire an item on her own, then her father cannot receive her bill of divorce. She has to receive it. Conversely, if she is not able to acquire an item on her own, then only her father can receive the bill of divorce. It's not that you have a choice whether to give it to the girl or the father. If she's so young that she can't receive it, you have to give it to the father. If she's old enough to receive it, you give it to her. But rather, her father alone receives her bill of divorce on her behalf. So the Mishnah states another principle. And any female who is unable to safeguard her bill of divorce, either due to her young age or lack of mental competence, she is unable to be divorced, since a bill of divorce is effective only for one who understands the severing of ties that a divorce engenders. Right? So if she was betrothed while she was still very young, okay, her father made the betrothal and the get has to be given to her father. If her father dies in the meantime, so then you can't divorce her until she's old enough to understand. Or it would seem like if there's a couple that are married and she becomes mentally incompetent, let's say she's in a coma, God forbid, can he divorce her while she's in a coma? No, right? No, because she's not going to be able to understand that she's received a get. Are there exceptions to that law? Are there nuances to it? Yes, outside the scope of today's class. Reish Lakish says, just as there is a dispute with regard to divorce as to whether both a young woman and her father can accept her bill of divorce or only her father can do so, so too there is a dispute with regard to betrothal. And Rabbi Yochanan says the dispute is with regard to divorce, but with regard to betrothal, everyone agrees that her father has the right to accept betrothal on her behalf, but she does not. And Rabbi Yosef, because she's so young, and Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Hanina, said, what is the reason of Rabbi Yochanan, in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis, that there is a distinction between divorce and betrothal? In the case of divorce, when she brings herself back into her father's authority by means of the bill of divorce, it is considered as though the father has obtained the bill of divorce via his daughter, and therefore either she or her father can receive it. She's acting as the agent of her father to receive her own get. In the case of betrothal, where she removes herself from her father's authority when she accepts betrothal, she cannot do this by herself. Consequently, only her father can accept the betrothal, but not her. Now the Gemara asks, but isn't there the case of Levirite betrothal? So Levirite betrothal, a woman is married, her husband dies. They have not had a child together. The husband is childless, but he leaves a brother. So she has a Levirite bond, right? She is the Yavama. The surviving brother is the Yavam, as we learned in Tractate Yavamos. And until they either perform Yibum, which means they're going to marry, or they perform Chalitza, which means they're going to go their separate ways. Until that happens, they have a Levirite bond. And she is prohibited from marrying anyone else other than the brother of the deceased man. What's Levirite betrothal? Levirite betrothal is by rabbinic law only. They don't need betrothal. Yibum is actually making love, right? So when the surviving brother and the widow have intercourse, then they're fully married, just like that. They don't need a betrothal. But the rabbis decree that there should be a betrothal before they actually, have intercourse and get married. It's more appropriate. It's not legally binding by Torah law, but it does have a strong effect if there are more than one surviving brother. Right? She has a Levirite bond with all the brothers. In other words, she can marry any surviving brother of the husband who died childless. Let's say he had multiple brothers. But once she performs Levirite betrothal with one of those brothers, then all the other brothers are disqualified, and she can only perform Yibum with that one to whom she is betrothed. If they want to break it off, she's going to need Chalitza and a get because of the betrothal. Now, the Gemara asks, but isn't there the case of Levirite betrothal, where the Yavama removes herself from her father's authority, and yet we learned in a Baraisa, now we're on 44a, if a minor girl was widowed after her betrothal, a surviving brother of her betrothed can perform Levirite betrothal only with the consent of her father. And in the case of a young woman, he can do so either with her consent or with the consent of her father, unlike the law with regard to regular betrothal. And this indicates that a young woman can accept Levirite betrothal on her own, despite the fact that it removes her from her father's authority. So rather, if it was stated like this. Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says, what is the reason of Rabbi Yochanan, in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis, with regard to betrothal, which takes effect only with the consent of the one who accepts the betrothal? Her father can accept it, but not her. Why? Because betrothal will remove her from her father's authority and into the authority of the husband. Even if she's going to keep living with her father, right now, some authority over her actions, ability to annul vows, etc., is going to be shared with the new husband. So the father has to approve this. With regard to a get, a bill of divorce, which can be given without the consent of a wife, either she or her father can receive it. A woman doesn't have to consent. She just has to understand that she's been divorced. The one in the coma couldn't understand that. Now the Gemara asks, but isn't Levirite betrothal valid only with her consent, like other betrothals? And yet it teaches in the Baraisa that either she or her father can accept it. And the Gemara answers, there it is referring to Levirite betrothal that is performed against her will, and it is in accordance with the opinion of Rebbe. As it is taught in a Baraisa, if a Yavam performs Levirite betrothal with his Yavama without her consent, Rebbe says the Yavam acquires her, and the rabbis, the majority, say he does not acquire her. And that's the law. It's the majority. So the Gemara clarifies what is the reason of Rebbe. He derives the law of Levirite betrothal from the law of sexual intercourse that a Yavam engages in with a Yavama, right? Yibum. So just as intercourse with the Yavama renders her acquired, even if it is done against her will, so too here in the case of Levirite betrothal, the Yavam can betroth her against her will. Now, that doesn't mean that this woman who's already endured the tragedy of becoming a widow, right, her husband died, he was left childless, and now he leaves a brother, right? And she's like, I do not want to make yibum with that brother. I do not want to marry him. I will perform chalitza with him, so I'm free to go marry someone else, but I do not want to marry my husband's brother. And what if he rapes her? Now she's forced against her will to marry that man? Really? That's not what the sages are saying. What they're saying is, if he rapes her, then, sexual intercourse happened. So she's acquired against her will in the sense that they'll need a get to break apart this bond. She's going to get that get. They're going to force this man to give her the get. And that's in addition to all the other punishments that he'll endure as a rapist, including possibly the death penalty. But they will have to deal with the fact that sexual intercourse happened. Where am I? Now, the Gemara clarifies, with regard to what do the rabbis and Rebbe disagree? Rebbe holds that one should derive matters involving a Yavama from other matters involving a Yavama. And the marriage between a Yavama and a Yavam can be formalized against her will, and therefore Levirite betrothal would work even against her will. He is overruled by the rabbis who say that one should derive matters involving betrothal from the laws of betrothal. And since you cannot betroth a woman against her will, you cannot create Levirite betrothal against her will either, and that is the law. Now the Gemara comments, and so too it is reasonable to rule with regard to betrothal, like the rabbis, as Rabbi Yochanan explains, that only the father can accept betrothal from the fact that it teaches in the latter clause of the Baraisa that with regard to Levirite betrothal, in the case of a young woman, the Yavam can perform it either with her consent or with the consent of her father, unlike the law with regard to standard betrothal. And this indicates that she can be betrothed in standard betrothal only with her father's agreement because of her age. And the Gemara asks, then shall we say that this should be a conclusive refutation of the opinion of Reish Lakish, who holds that according to the rabbis, a young woman can also accept her own betrothal? And the Gemara answers, Reish Lakish could have said to you, in accordance with whose opinion is this Baraisa? It is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says two hands do not acquire, an item is one. Either she accepts betrothal or her father, but not both. So the Gemara asks, if it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, why does the Baraisa state, unlike the halacha with regard to standard betrothal? It should have stated, unlike the halacha with regard to divorce, as Rabbi Yehuda stated his opinion in the Mishna with regard to divorce, not betrothal. So the Gemara answers, yes, it is indeed so. It should have referred to divorce, but since it taught the laws of Levirite betrothal, which is similar to betrothal, it also taught unlike the law with regard to standard betrothal. Now the Gemara asks, and according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, in what way is Levirite betrothal different from divorce? Why can a young woman accept the former, the Levirite betrothal, but she cannot receive her own bill of divorce when both Levirite betrothal and divorce can be performed without her consent? And the Gemara answers, the law of Levirite betrothal is different. Since she is bonded to the Yavam and standing in wait for him, acceptance of the betrothal money by the Yavama suffices to effect the Levirite betrothal. And the Gemara comments, now that you have arrived at this explanation, the statement of Rabbi Yochanan also should not pose a difficulty for you from the outset. One cannot question his statement with regard to the rabbi's opinion in the case of betrothal. Levirite betrothal is different, since the Yavam is bonded to the Yavam and standing in wait for him. Now, we learned in the Mishnah that a man can betroth his daughter to a man, a father can betroth his daughter to a man when she is a young woman, by himself or by means of his agent. Right now we're back to our Mishnah. And the Gemara analyzes this. Yes, he can betroth her by himself or by means of his agent, but no, she cannot become betrothed by herself or by means of her agent. That's not the law. This is a conclusive refutation of Reish Lakish, who holds that according to the opinion of the rabbis, a young woman, it's true for her, not for an adult woman. This is a conclusive refutation of Reish Lakish, who holds that according to the opinion of the rabbis, a young woman can accept her own betrothal. And the Gemara answers, Reish Lakish could have said to you, this Mishnah also is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara asks, but can you establish this Mishnah in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda? But the last clause in the following Mishnah teaches, and by the way, I'll just mention, there are many laws, that are not really practiced today, like all the laws dealing with the temple. When the temple is not standing, we haven't been able to perform those laws in a couple thousand years, but we study them with the same intensity. These laws about betrothing a young woman, and certainly marriage to a young woman, meaning a 12-year-old, not practiced today. Why? Right? Aside from societal mores, there is also a standard law, a very important law, that the law of the land is the law, right? So unless there is a law that that a Jew is living in a country where the law is that he has to perform idolatry, we're not going to follow that law. But if a law says, that you can't marry a woman until she's 17 years old, then that is the law, right? And so even though under Torah law you could marry her much younger, we don't do that because we live in a country where the minimum age of marriage is, let's say, 17 or whatever that state is. So it's just an important principle to remember. Okay, where was I? Okay. We learned in the Mishnah that a man can betroth his daughter, that a father can betroth his daughter when she is a young woman, by himself or by means of an agent. And the Gemara says, yes, he can betroth her by himself or by means of an agent, but no, she cannot become betrothed by herself or by means of her agent, owing to her age. So this is a conclusive refutation of Reish Lakish. But Reish Lakish could have said to you, this Mishnah also is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, right, who says either him or her, not both. So the Gemara asks, but can you establish this Mishnah in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda? But the last clause in the following Mishnah on page 46b teaches, in the case of one who says to a woman, be betrothed to me with this date, like a little, just one piece of fruit, and he adds, be betrothed to me with that date. Now, she is betrothed only if one of them is worth one peruta on its own. The minimum amount of money that you can use for betrothal using money or the equivalent of money is something like either a peruta coin or something worth a peruta. But a single date is not worth even a peruta, so you can't use that as the object of value to create betrothal. And if we say, who is the Tana who taught that the two dates are valued separately only if he said become betrothed and become betrothed in a separate statement when giving each date, but that if he said become betrothed only once, then the value of the two dates are added together? And Rabbah said, who said that? It is Rabbi Shimon. We're going to see why this is relevant. It is Rabbi Shimon who says that one is not liable to bring multiple offerings for taking false oaths to multiple people in the same utterance. For example, if one says, I take an oath that I do not have your item, right? You say you lent it to me, I say I don't have it, right? You didn't give it to me, I don't have it, I'm not responsible. There's no proof either way, so I go to court and I take an oath. I hereby swear, obviously it's just teaching example, that I don't have this object that this guy claims that I have, right? That's taking an oath. So if, for example, one says, I take an oath that I do not have your item, nor yours, nor yours, nor yours, right? So in one utterance, he claims that he doesn't have property that doesn't belong to Tom, nor to Bill, nor to Henry, but it's all one utterance. So if he's lying, then does he owe 3 different sin offerings or just one? So Rabbi Shimon says apparently just one. And this is the law unless one states an expression of an oath to each and every one of the plaintiffs by stating, I take an oath that I do not have yours, I take an oath that I do not have yours, and I take an oath that I do not have yours. In which case he would bring multiple offerings if these are all lies. So consequently, the Tana of this Mishnah is Rabbi Shimon, not Rabbi Yehuda. And if you would say that the Tana of the entire Mishnah concerning betrothal is Rabbi Yehuda, who typically disagrees with Rabbi Shimon, and that with regard to the specification of separate oaths, he holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, this cannot be. But does he in fact hold in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon with regard to the specification of separate oaths? Wasn't it taught in a baraisa? This is the principle with regard to one's liability to bring offerings for a false oath. If he included all the statements in one oath, he is liable for only one oath, but if he specified them, he is liable for each and every one. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says, if one said, I take an oath that I do not have your deposit, nor yours, nor yours, nor yours, and he was found to have taken a false oath, he is liable to bring an offering for each and every one. Rabbi Eliezer says, if he said, I do not have yours, nor yours, nor yours, nor yours, I take an oath, then he is liable for each and every one. Since he stated the oath at the end, it refers back to each element of his statement. Rabbi Shimon says he is liable to bring more than one offering, only if he states an expression of an oath for each and every one. So this indicates that Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with Rabbi Shimon with regard to the question of when oaths are considered distinct. So rather, the Gemara explains in the opposite manner. The Tana of the entire Mishnah concerning betrothal is Rabbi Shimon. And with regard to the law of agency, he holds, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, that only the father of a young woman can appoint an agent to accept her betrothal or receive her bill of divorce. So the Gemara relates, one day, Rabbi Asi did not go to the study hall, and he found Rabbi Zera and said to him, I too did not go, And he said to him, what was said today in the study hall? And Rabbi Zera said to him, me too, I didn't go to the study hall today. But Rabbi Avin is the one who went, and he said the entire coterie sided with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan that there is a difference between betrothal and divorce in the case of a young woman. And Reish Lakish screamed at them like a crane. Doesn't the verse state, and she departs out of his house and goes and becomes another man's wife, thus juxtaposing the laws of divorce and betrothal. But no one paid any attention to him. And Rabbi Asi said to him, is Rabbi Avin reliable? Can one be sure that he transmitted an accurate report of what happened today in the study hall? And Rabbi Zera said to him, yes. In this case, he can be trusted, since the elapsed time was only like the interval between catching a fish from the sea and bringing it to a frying pan. Not so much time had passed. He wouldn't have forgot what was said, so we can rely on him what was said. So Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, when I quote this statement, I do not state in the name of Rabbi Avin, the son of Rabbi Chia, nor Rabbi Avin Bar Kahana, but rather in the name of Rabbi Avin, without specification. And the Gemara asks, what difference is there? Why does it matter which Rabbi Avin is cited as the source of this statement? And the Gemara answers, it would matter if one were to raise a contradiction between one of his rulings and another one of his rulings. If there were to be conflicting opinion attributed to a specific Rabbi Avin, for example, Rabbi Avin, the son of Rabbi Chia, it would not be a true contradiction, as this statement might have been issued by a different Rabbi Avin. You can see what's going on. Like, why are we talking about what Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon say about how many offerings need to be brought, depending on what kind of false oath was stated, when we're really discussing a Mishnah in which the question is whether a father can accept betrothal for his daughter and whether he can appoint an agent to do so, and whether the daughter can accept betrothal herself or appoint an agent to do so in that specific time period when she's known as a young woman, meaning between the ages of 12 and 12 and a half, more or less. What does that have to do with the first set? And the answer is, well, who it's formulated this Mishnah, if it's Rabbi Yehuda, is there a contradiction between another statement of Rabbi Yehuda, or is it Rabbi Shimon? Is there a contradiction with another statement of Rabbi Shimon? So Rava asked Rav Nachman, now we're on 44b, according to the rabbis who hold that a young woman can accept her own bill of divorce, what is the law with regard to the ability of a young woman to appoint an agent to receive her bill of divorce from the hand of her husband? And the Gemara explains the two sides of this question. Since a young woman is under her father's jurisdiction, is she, with regard to acquisitions, considered like an extension of her father's hand, or is she considered like her father's courtyard? And the Gemara clarifies, she might be considered like her father's hand, and just as her father can appoint an agent, so too she can appoint an agent. Or perhaps she is considered like her father's courtyard, and therefore she is not divorced until the bill of divorce actually reaches her possession, as a courtyard cannot appoint an agent, but it can receive a bill of divorce in the sense that a bill of divorce thrown in his courtyard is considered to be in his possession. Right? We're getting into an interesting nuance where we started by talking about, can the father appoint an agent to receive betrothal for his daughter? Can the daughter appoint an agent to receive her own betrothal? Now we're asking, can the daughter function as the agent of the father where she's not permitted to receive her own bill of divorce, but she could actually be handed the bill of divorce and receive it on behalf of her father because he's the only one that can receive it. But if she acts as the father's agent, it's like she's divorced, but not because she received it, rather because she received it as the agent of her father. And the Gemara explains the two sides of the question. Since a young woman... Wait, I just said that. Now the Gemara asks, and is Rava uncertain about this matter? But doesn't Rava say, if one wrote a get and placed it in the hand of his wife's slave who is sleeping, but she is guarding the slave, then it is a valid get. If the slave was awake, then it is not a valid get. Why is it not a valid get if he is awake? It is because the slave is for her a courtyard that is not consciously secured by her. I.e., when the slave is awake, he is not fully controlled by her. He could receive this thing and run away with it. And if it enters your mind that a young woman is considered like her father's courtyard, then even when the bill of divorce reaches her possession, she could not be divorced since she is like a courtyard that is not consciously secured by her father. Just as a slave has free will, so does this girl. So rather, it is actually obvious to Rava that a young woman is considered like her father's hand and not like his courtyard. And this is what he was asking. Is she just as strong as her father's hand to the extent that she can appoint an agent or not? Rav Nachman said to him, she cannot appoint an agent. Rava raised an objection from a Mishna, Tractate Gittin 65a. In the case of a minor girl who said to an agent, receive my bill of divorce from me, it is not a valid get until the get reaches her possession, since a minor is not considered legally competent to appoint an agent. Rava inferred from this, but in the case of a young woman, it is a valid get, which indicates that a young woman can appoint an agent, unlike a minor. And the Gemara answers, with what are we dealing here? With a situation where she does not have a father. She can appoint an agent since she is of age and is under her own authority. But a betrothed young woman whose father is still alive is under her father's authority and cannot appoint an agent. I'm very close to done. Questions or comments, please get them in. And the Gemara asks, but from the fact that the latter clause of that same Mishnah teaches, if her father said to an agent, go out and receive a bill of divorce for my daughter, then if the husband seeks to retract his decision after he has given the bill of divorce to the agent, he cannot retract it, since it is as though the bill of divorce reached their possession. By inference, one can say that in the first clause, we are dealing with a case where she has a father. And the Gemara answers, the Mishnah is incomplete. And this is what it is teaching. In the case of a minor girl who said, receive my get for me, it is not a get until the get reaches her possession. But in the case of a young woman, it is a get as soon as it reaches her agent's possession. In what case is this statement said? It is said when she does not have a father. But if she has a father and her father said to an agent, go out and receive my daughter's get on her behalf, and the husband seeks to retract his decision, he cannot retract it. That's where we're going to stop. And we'll continue tomorrow with the remainder of page 44 and then do page 45, God willing. Okay, let me see if I've got any questions or comments on these two dafs. Bill, is there no concern that they both might covet the woman whose divorce they're testifying on? Perhaps they each independently desire her, but each thinks he can persuade her to accept him over his co-conspirator. Yes, that is a concern, but it's not enough of a concern to warrant changing the law about whether an agent can function as a witness, right? The sages made decrees for common situations and not for uncommon situations. Matthew, can you be your own advocate? Absolutely. Now, when we talk about an advocate in a case, we're talking about lawyers, right? Attorneys, that they function as your advocate in a court case. In rabbinic courts, there's no such thing. You might bring somebody who's trained in the law and how to make a good argument before a beis din, whether that's a lawyer or a rabbi lawyer. But you don't have, before a beis din, you don't have a lawyer in the same way that you would necessarily. You must have a lawyer with, God forbid, you're tried in a secular court for criminal law or tort law, any kind of, case. You got to have a lawyer with you. But before a beis din, it's different, right? Maybe you want to bring somebody who's trained in what to do, but the standard thing was not. You don't have lawyers, and it's really the judges are going to act as both the judge and the jury and the questioner, and they have a holy duty to perform. Were there bad judges? Yeah, but and you would want to sort of bring your own rabbi to make sure that you're not dealing with some kind of incompetent or corrupt judge who might expose that. But the concept of bringing a lawyer to a rabbinic court is not at all like it is in a secular court. Sharon, what if one takes an oath with multiple names mentioned and there is a partial truth, i.e. some people listed were accurately depicted and others not? How many oaths then were affected? I mean, that's a really good question. I think and it would definitely depend. And we didn't even say where the law ended up. But according to the one who says you'd only have to do one sin offering, even if all of them were false. Well, then presumably if some of them were false, you still only owe one sin offering. And then according to the one who said that you owe a separate sin offering for each false oath, even if they were all stated in one utterance, then presumably you would only have to bring a sin offerings for the ones that were false and not for the ones that were true. But like I said, that law was just brought, in passing to get at the difference between Shimon and Yehuda. But we didn't really get to where that law ended up. Jonathan, the whole issue of agency is interesting. The Talmud seems to take the stance that the agent is an extension of the person who appointed him or her. Yes, but not always. Things become more tricky with minors, whether they can be an agent or whether they can appoint. One point I was confused on is what is the age of majority? Is it 20 or 13 and 12 for girls or 30 in other cases? And it would seem that, we have... different age thresholds are used for different purposes, although generally, when does a boy become obligated in the mitzvahs that adhere to an adult? When he turns 13. And when does a girl become obligated in the commandments that adhere to an adult? When she turns 12. And finally, Tom, can a young woman whose father died be considered under her brother's authority? Well, definitely not a simple answer, but we certainly have seen that if the father dies, the brother or the mother can create a betrothal for her. But that betrothal is not as strong as a betrothal that the father creates. What are the nuances? What are the differences? I'm not sure off the top of my head. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we're together again tomorrow at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night.